What's going on, everyone? Real quick, before we get into this video, I just want to say that this is a potential spoiler video. This is the information that Vieweranon, a notorious leaker of films, had posted to Twitter recently, and many people wanted me to talk about it and have a discussion, so this is what this video is for. So if you're somebody that does not want spoilers and you want to click away, I completely understand. I would appreciate you hitting that like button before you leave. It helps out the channel and gets us out to people that do want this information. If you're still here, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification so you never miss an upload. Stay up to date with all things Scream. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. So, if you're still here, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's get right into this tweet. I'm going to read it, and then we will have our discussion per usual. So, Vieweranon. So, where are Sid, Gale, and Dewey 10 years after Scream 4? Dewey and Gale are divorced. She got a show in New York, and he couldn't handle it there. He's no longer sheriff, but lives in Woodsboro and watches her show every morning. Sid is married with 2 kids. Now, the bonus was that Hicks is now the Woodsboro sheriff. So, let's break this down. Now, obviously, this ties into a spoiler that I covered that he posted on Reddit. Now, we dove into that actual spoiler and all that information. I'll even link that video down in the description below if you never saw it. But this ties into what that leak, that spoiler was. Now, for those that don't know, Vieweranon is a notorious leaker. He's had several films in the past that he has leaked information for. So he's a credible source, but as always, take this stuff with a grain of salt because you never really know until the film comes out, especially with this Scream. There have been so many scripts, so many different versions. They even filmed several scenes, several different ways, so it's very likely that this could be legit information, but not for the theatrical release. But that being said, let's break this down. So Dewey and Gale are divorced. Honestly, that just isn't surprising to me, given their history of their relationship. It would make sense that they would sort of go their separate ways eventually. Even in Scream 4, you kind of saw you could tell that they love each other, but they're just 2 spirits that don't connect. You know, like they're total opposites. And Gale was really passionate about sort of reinventing her career, so much so that she was willing to put herself in harm's way. Now, so that would tie into she got a show in New York and he couldn't handle it. Because obviously he's a Woodsboro person. He's the poster boy for Woodsboro. I mean, look at the promo that was released. I mean, he is Woodsboro. When you think of Woodsboro, boom, you think Dewey. So it would make sense that it would be tough for him to sort of take that step, live in New York, a big city. He had a hard time living in Hollywood, and New York is a more crowded, hectic version of that. So it would be understandable that he would struggle with that. And Gale wanting to reinvent herself, want to revitalize her career, I can see her going to New York to take that role. 60 Minutes 2, if you remember Scream 3. So that makes a ton of sense. And then obviously would no longer be the sheriff, but he returned to Woodsboro. He lives in Woodsboro and he watches the show every morning because obviously, I mean, I would assume he's still in love with her. He's always been in love with her. He's always cared for her, and vice versa. So it would make a ton of sense that you would see that sort of him watching her every day and still having that communication, still being close to an extent. I mean, that's how they are in real life. They co-parent. They're still best friends in a lot of ways. Both of them mention it all the time that, that they love working together still. Like I mean, even their split, when they did split up, was very amicable. It was very peaceful. They did it the right way. And then Scream 3, they're getting married and everyone's like, wait, what? Like, what's going on? This is weird. So it makes perfect sense that would sort of mirror the Scream film itself of like them being, peaceful with each other, but still living separate lives. Now, at the same time, I have to be honest. I don't know about this because this part, because the problem is, okay, not only do you have to bring Sidney back to Woodsboro, but now you have to bring Gale back to Woodsboro. You know, if she's living the high life in New York as on her own show and having her own life and doing her own thing, what would be the reason for her to return to Woodsboro to, investigate these killings again? If she's big time, if she has her own show in New York. I mean, people in New York don't just get their own show. People don't just move to New York just to have a show that isn't successful. So if she has a show that Dewey's watching every morning, it is clearly a successful show. So why would she put herself in that position? The only thing that I could think of would be because Scream is very great at mirroring reality. It's very possible that maybe because it's the 25th anniversary here in reality, maybe it's the 25th anniversary in Woodsboro, so that's her reasoning for returning. Maybe she's covering a story there. It would also kind of line up to the photo leak that we saw her in her sort of reporting outfit, and a lot of speculation in regards to that. Was like, is she returning to reporting? Is she, what is it? Well, obviously she'd be dolled up to that degree if she had a big time sort of show, a 60-minute show type thing, So that would make perfect sense and line up. I just think that it would, I don't know. I mean, it would come down to execution and how the film itself goes about it. But I feel like it could get very clunky because you have to have an easy explanation for Gale, which, granted, like I said, 25th anniversary thing, maybe that's the thing that sparks the killings. That's a possibility too. But you have to have a believable story to get Gale to return to Woodsboro. And then on top of that, you have to have an explainable reason for Sidney to return to Woodsboro. Unless Sidney's already living in Woodsboro, but at this point we have no information in that regard. And why would she be? The only reason she returned in 4 was because she wanted to, go on her book tour. She was going on her book tour and doing all that stuff, and that was where everything happened. And then the Jill thing happened. It would make more sense that she would kind of go back, finish her book tour, go back home. Especially because that gets into the second point. Sidney is married with 2 kids. So the fact that she's married with 2 kids, I highly doubt she would want to do that in Woodsboro, given her past, given her history, given everything. If the Sid is married with 2 kids, actually is a thing. So it's just, I don't know, it just feels kind of clunky to me, if I'm being honest. But execution and story and delivery is everything, so it very well could work. I'm not saying that this is, nonsense, but at the same time, it doesn't sound like it's not that it's not a believable story. It's just that I feel like it's too many variables that you need to connect for what, like, just when you could have just kept it simple and focus on more important aspects of the film, such as character development, the new sort of generation that you're trying to build up, the main story plot, the twist, etc. All that stuff. I feel would be better spent with that than it would be to explain Gale, explain Sidney, explain all whatever. Dewey not being the sheriff anymore isn't a big surprise either. I mean, he's getting up there in age, and besides that, he's had a lot of injuries and attacks, and given that he just went through this again in Scream 4, it's very likely that he's just like, I'm done with this. I don't want to be the guy that has to jump into the fire every time. I think that's a realistic possibility. Now, to go to Sid's children and being married. Now, the big question everyone wants to know is, could it be Kincaid? Because there was talk about Kincaid being in Scream 4, but the actor, I'm lost for his name at this time, my apologies, but the actor had other obligations, so he wasn't able to be in that film. If that is actually true, that was the story that they put out there. So, you got to take it for what it is. But if he is potentially in this film, I think it's a possibility, especially if she's married with kids. We don't have another sort of character that would fill in that spot. And not just that, but not only do you need a character that would sort of fill in those holes, but Kincaid would make a lot of sense given he knows Sidney's past. He has connections. He has ties. He was a cop, so he could protect her. She would feel safe. All the sort of checks for what you would want to see Sidney's husband to have. He sort of fits that mold. But if it's Kincaid, we don't know at this time. So that'll be interesting to see. And then 2 children. The children I find interesting because the main spoilers that were leaked were that we talked about and dove into, most of them, we're still doing that. So if you're not following along, I highly recommend following along on those spoilers. But it talked about Sidney being motherly, that she was very motherly, and to specific characters in the Scream 5 film. And so it would make sense that that motherliness would come because she is now a mother of children. So it kind of ties into that. I just feel like it's surprising that these points wouldn't have been made in that spoiler, because the spoilers that we're going over regular are supposed to be like people that saw the final film. It's supposed to be like legit, like this is the film. It doesn't talk about anything that is super significant that it would completely ruin the film, but it talks about some very significant and important points throughout the film, and as well as the OG3 and sort of their characters at the moment. And so I'm not saying that this again isn't legit. It's just interesting because there are some conflictions. But again, who knows what is real? It's all on the internet. And then the bonus, Hicks is now the Woodsboro sheriff. Makes a ton of sense, obviously, because she was the deputy, so she would have been next in line. It would make sense to that regard. If she is the killer, though, that definitely adds another layer to her character, because now she has essential control of operations behind the scenes and so on and so forth. So I find that really interesting as well, that would be a key point for the story, especially if she turns out to be Ghostface in that sort of reveal. But all in all, I mean, it's not anything too crazy to where it's like, you know, mind-blowing or anything like that, but it I don't, if I'm giving my honest opinion, I don't buy this. If I'm being honest, I don't think that this is legit. Now, Vieweranon is very well known for leaking information about films, and that doesn't mean that this information wasn't a part of the film at some point. Again, they've done several versions of the film, several versions of the script, several versions of scenes in general. So it's a possibility that maybe this was a real point in that, and it is a possibility that he is correct. But just because somebody's leaked stuff in the past doesn't mean that they're always right. So it's just something to keep in mind. But nothing is unbelievable. Like all this stuff, like nothing here I say is like, oh, that's silly and wouldn't make sense. The closest thing to that would be Gale being in New York, because now you have to make that a believable tie. But even then, there's simple ways to go about that. So I don't think anything is too unreasonable or unrealistic. I don't know. It just seems kind of odd to me, especially given the film, especially that they've stated that this film is not centered around the OG3, that it's centered around these other people, and the OG3 kind of trickle in, that yes, they have significant roles and of importance, but with this kind of information in regards to the OG3, that's a lot of stuff that we need information on. It's a lot. You can't just show Sidney's kids one time and then brush it off. You know, you can't just show Sidney's husband one time and then brush it off. You can't show the divorce of Dewey and Gale, and they're living in different cities and, you know, living different lives and stuff like that, and just brush it off. Like, all of this requires a lot of screen time and development that I just feel is better spent elsewhere. But that's my opinion, and as always, I want to hear from you, so let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What do you think about these points? How do you feel about Sidney being potentially married and having children? What do you think about, you know, Gale and Dewey being divorced? Like I said, that is probably the most believable thing for me, because it just makes a ton of sense. But my other thing is that, like, why Gale, it's another key point that I'll be brief here. Why Gale getting a show in New York? Because she was essentially washed up for some time. So usually these networks and stuff don't just call somebody and say, hey, you haven't done anything in 10, 11 years. Let me, you know, let's give you a prime time show although Gale is extremely known and stuff, but as far as we know, she hasn't done anything majorly significant since Scream 2. Scream 3, she took a leave of absence, went on to help Dewey recover. Dewey got better. They ended up separating. She went on to do like the seminars and stuff and speaking and wrote another book and stuff. But she wasn't the huge star that she was in 2. And then Scream 3, Scream 4, she was essentially, had lost her luster essentially. And we don't know exactly how much time, how long of a gap between 3 and 4 that actually developed, and she tried to revitalize her career. Yes, it's possible after Scream 4 she was able to revitalize her career, but again, more things that need an explanation. It's just it just seems like a lot to unpack in one film, on top of explaining the Meeks, on top of explaining Judy's role, on top of explaining the story in general, the twist, Ghostface, the OG3. All of these are significant stories. It's just a lot to unpack in one film, in my opinion, and I don't want to see it get too convoluted. But again, let me know what you think. If you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, again, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button, follow by the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.